from me. It's quite an important part in the training that you give, and you reflect quite a bit on it. I just wanted to know how it came about.
I'm not sure. I think what I was always intrigued by, having done this stuff for nearly 20 years now, and when I started with Suzuki, I did the basic stuff, and then when Jackie and I started training our company, or forming a company using the training, we had to work out ways to actually adapt it and to actually broaden the scope of the training, because the training itself, as far as Suzuki is concerned, is a preparation for his work. So he has also his rehearsal processes, and the training is part of that. But the actual Suzuki training itself hasn't got a rehearsal process in it. So the FSAK, our version of the training, I had to make other modules, so to speak, more sort of modules which actually had improvisation and extended sort of creative processes rather than just the basic stuff. So, and I guess I developed those things by watching the training and throwing in sort of offerings, shall we say, or demands or requests, and then the actors would respond to those things, and then out of that came a very, very interesting type of energy, which I now call a plasma, which is in my second book. And I think it was the reading of that plasma that actually caused me to actually invent all these other exercises. So very quickly I realised that because the training itself is a self-contained event, as in you know the language, you know the vocabulary, you know what your prescribed function is, that you start here and go there and it takes 4.5 minutes or whatever, then it's very clear the actors actually can understand that and participate in it without me actually having to be continually admonishing them or encouraging them or throwing stuff in, so to speak. So I realised that that's what made the ability for me to actually create these other exercises. I could actually stand outside the event, much like a football coach, watching the training and watching his lieutenants go through all the drills with the players, and I realised by doing that, the head coach stands outside and watches it much the same as the general watches an army. He can't, if he goes inside, it becomes too much a part of it. Of course, he can't actually really observe it as a third person. So I realised that the matrix is what this thing makes, and that enables the director, teacher, to stand outside, outline the actual event, stand outside of it, and then actually witness it as almost like an audience. And that enables you to stand away from it and actually observe what's actually going on, what's happening to the kids as they do this stuff. If you're continuing in there sort of throwing balls at them, so to speak, well of course you're actually participating in it, so how can you stand off? And I think one of the big misunderstandings in theatre direction is this confusion between what is a matrix and what is a dialectic. The dialectic is you as director saying, yeah, do it a bit slower this way, and then when you do that, stand up and walk towards this. Well, that's you making some suggestion, and then the actor responds to that. But that's a direct dialectic between the two people. And a matrix is a very different thing, where you can actually stand outside that and watch it, observe it. And that's where my ideas came from. All these exercises that I invented as an offshoot of Suzuki, the FSAK ones, are really born of that. And I realised, of course, I also realised that's what Suzuki does. He must have done that himself, because he's not trained in anything like movement or direction. He's not really trained at all. He's actually, I think he studied political science at university and he joined the University Drama Society and actually sort of took it over when all the other sort of more Marxist guys went to man the barricades in the 60s. So, and I thought, well, how did he develop this very, very acute directorial skill? And he must have done it by using the training.
Yes.
And so that's why I was all encouraged to foster this type of thing, and now I really communicate that to people such as yourself. You've got to find a way to make the kids, as it were, actually understand what they're doing, be confident in what they're doing, and not get lost psychologically or not get lost metaphysically in what they're doing, or physically get lost. And that's why you need this very powerful structure. But in that very powerful structure, you also have to have elastic events that you throw in, like hop around or something, like some of those more bizarre things you do to actually shake this complacency of the actual actors.
Yes.
So now over the years I've really realised what that actually means, to have a matrix, what I call a matrix, or have a dialectic, and to not let those get confused themselves. They should be able to be separated.
Yeah.
So that's it. And now I really talk about those terms so that people know that that's actually it. I mean, I've also made sure nowadays that people realise that that magical feeling that comes out of a special performance of an exercise, and we all feel that. We all go, wow, that was amazing. They did this, and it felt, and wasn't it incredible? Of course, we can't really analyse what it is because it's actually a sort of mysterious type of energy, but that can be educative too.
Well, it provides an incredible awareness of audience and your interaction with the audience as well, which is quite important.
That's right, and it also has two vectors. One is the knowledge and one is the mystery.
Yes.
The knowledge is this person standing, then you go, wow, she can do this and she did that. Oh, she's got so equipped to do that, she's got a beautiful voice or something. That's the knowledge. But then, of course, surrounding that like a type of aura is this mystery. And that is what the magic of theatre is, isn't it? And that's born out of, I guess, reading the plasma and going, well, this is actually a thing. It's not just an idea. And you and I agree, oh, that was amazing. There's something going on inside that. And you can get a truck driver to come in and he'll go, wow, that was amazing. I don't know what it was, but it was amazing. And so we say, you should really, I guess, covet those things, really encourage them and really treasure them in a way, because that's actually where you get your inspiration for the next thing you want to do.
Yes.
Regardless of what it is. So that's the matrix is about.
Yeah. Which also helps, it just in what you're saying there, is that it's always in you through the whole process, which does also help with your understanding of the text and its level of importance in either the scene or the situation, is because you are really internalising each of the words
and yeah, that's the other thing, I suppose. You're saying that speech, of course, the speech is, if you're talking about Shakespeare, you have this to be or not to be speech, which of course has existed since 1597 or something, and exists even before we go. When we go, it still exists before us and after us. But that's as a literary experience, as an intellectual event. When you're performing, you have a duty to bring a sort of a physical presence to that speech, and you have to own it for that moment. And so you've got to see the speech as something more than just the words. It's actually an expression of your body, your physical body, your emotional body, your psychological body. And so we actually make sure that not only you think of the speech as just words, but it's actually times. It's time and space. So when I ask you to do a turn, 360 turn, or a splendor of sunburst, and actually take the whole 360 turn and finish up at the front again, so you've got this knowledge position, you're actually thinking, how does my voice fill this space between myself and whatever it is that I'm actually scanning at the time? And it's one thing to sort of go, I'm going to speak to that bottle or to that camera, oh splendor of sunburst. Well, that's of course fairly simple, I guess easy to understand. What happens if I'm going to say, speak to the camera, and then speak to that thing, then that wall, that piece of wood, and then this bed, and etc., etc., etc. Suddenly you realise that you are a 360-degree person, you're a three-dimensional actor, you're not just pop-up and sort of some sort of two-dimensional image which the audience sees. So, of course, that must have an effect on the way it sounds. Eventually it has to. And you don't even have to think about that, because you're not thinking about how it affects me so much as, how do I sort of occupy this? How do I deal with this challenge too, of course, moving and seeing these other things. And so your speech as your body, as an actor, you've got time and space. There's time and space around you. And that's what really charisma is. Charisma is actually the sense that your persona is actually bigger than your body. It's actually filling the whole space. And you know, there are certain people who are geniuses and they just can do this naturally, but most of us actually need to train that up, because it actually is not an obvious thing for most of us.
Yes. You talk a lot of mythology early on in the training. I guess I want to know a little bit more.
Well, we talk about mythology in a sense. I guess if you look at sort of great art, there's two aspects. There's mortality and then there's memory. And you probably argue that memory is also mortality too, but essentially if you look at the greatest plays, they're generally about people killing people or being killed in various ways and the effects of that before and after, etc. There's also memory too, as in loss of memory, or what Marcel Proust called à la recherche du temps perdu, in search of lost time. And I think most of us, and that lost time is actually innocence. It's actually innocence. It's when we didn't know something. So you have these times of, as a child playing with a sprinkler on the lawn, you must have these memories, and your mum and dad hosing you down or something like that. All those things are really parts of your own, I would call personal mythology. Remember the time your dad said this to you, or took your hand and sort of walked you down the street. They're all very powerful events from our past, which I guess most of us want to sort of somehow reconnect with. As we live our daily lives and have to have jobs and children and stuff like that, we lose that. I certainly feel that I have, and so I'm searching to find that sort of innocence again, that position of grace, as it were, before you actually had to know things and to do things. It's a form of, well, it's Garden of Eden, isn't it? It's the same thing. We talk about the Bible, the significant early event of knowledge, and knowledge means loss of innocence by definition. So, and so I'm actually, but I can't prescribe what that is for you, because you have a very different, and the other thing I suppose is, as you sort of re-engage with your own personal mythology, you can actually see a sort of a completion of your persona. You're standing on stage, and even though you say a speech like to be or not to be, the actual stuff inside the speech, you've got Shakespeare here, and you've got the words, but the stuff inside the speech is actually about you, and what you think about to be or not to be. So of course, that revolves around all these sort of, this cache of memories, as it were, which I think you can access now. We talk about that mythology in a sense, because in some of the exercise we do, say we're doing statues, and I say there's a statue, which I'm going to show, involves rising on the feet, on the tiptoes and holding a position. Well, of course, there's 4 stages of that. One stage is, can you actually do it? One, can you sort of get up there and not fall over? That's one. 2, can you really be still? That's a very significant thing, because to actually be still is quite a powerful thing. 3, can that statue actually say something? Can that actually have an impulse, some sort of emotional, psychological impulse, irrespective of whether that's conveyable or not? It's just, it has something to you. But then the 4th stage is that, can this position you make you go, oh, that reminds me of the time I did this thing with my brother when we were doing this thing down the street. So that actually talked, that physical expression has actually told me something about myself.
Yes.
So of course, if you get into that zone where you're doing that, that's pretty much a golden thing, both for yourself as an actor to do, and also for the audience to watch, because they'll really participate in that. And you can see it when looking at someone like Michael Jackson doing that moonwalking. He's actually going through that personal mythology, no question. And he's not going, oh, I hope the audience likes it, or he's not going, oh, I wonder if they understand it. He's just saying, I'm going to do this, guys, and I hope you like it. But you can see this thing, and you can actually see this look in his face, and it's very compelling to watch. Of course, the crowd goes nuts, because he's actually in some sort of unconscious, personal, mythological zone. So I think the training is not just, is obviously designed to take you to a place of competence, but even more than that, a transformational place where you actually take yourself to these situations, and then you find as an actor to do them actually is extremely enjoyable. And the whole hiatus where you sort of, oh dear, I'll do a lot terrible, I hope they like me, all that stuff that we think acting is about actually sort of tends to become very secondary, and you're actually saying to the audience, well, watch this, guys, and tell me what you think it's about. And so you completely spinning around the notions of what performance is, and sort of self-consciousness and nervousness and lack of confidence in your own skill. They become very secondary, because you're not really involved in that zone, because you're not trying to be clever, you're not trying to be attractive, you're just being yourself, and being yourself as a public event where the audience's observation and witnessing and this vicarious participation in what you're doing is actually enables them to find themselves too. And you see this in rock and roll, you see this in any field, and I guess what the FSAK is a place where you can actually foster that at a very clear level with a bunch of mates, really.
Yes. You talk a lot, and you haven't so far yet, I just want to bring it in, about the importance of the actor's own voice as opposed to the
elocution.
Yes.
Elocution's correct. Yes. We talked about that a bit today, didn't we? And we talked about the fact that what we tend to do when we're training people, we don't we never talk about what sort of voice. We have 4 or 5 voice levels. We say full voice, quiet voice, super quiet, and whisper. And then I'll say different voice, which means changes. But within that, we think the actor should arrive at their own voice instinctively. Now this takes a while. It takes 5 or 6 years actually, in a way. It's quite a long process. But what it means is that once you've arrived at or achieved it, it's actually your voice, you own that. you know, rather than something you've imposed upon yourself. I've got nothing particularly against these, thinking of the voice in very analytical terms, but it seems to me it's too intellectual. And if you say that the body doesn't lie, which is one of the sort of chief truths, isn't it, about body language, then we believe, and likewise Suzuki does, that the body is actually the source of real knowledge. And of course, it is in so many ways. How do you play tennis? You can't just read a book about it. You actually got to play it, play it, and play it, and play it, and play it. So that's borne out in all sorts of other arenas of life, isn't it? One of the premises of this training is that you really learn most when you're about to crack up. Now, this is not a fun thing to do in a way, but you wouldn't notice something like the stop. The vigor of the stop is a very powerful, very challenging event. Now, I've got to add here, it's not about pain, so it's not about masochism, but it's about discomfort.
Yeah.
And you know yourself, you're talking about swimming training. No, it was Rachel was swimming training, but you've done all sorts of other training. You've done you're horse riding, aren't you? So you understand it's all about repetition and again and again. And in fact, as in horse riding, of course, where you have this dialogue between you and the brain or the spirit of the horse, of course, you have to, it's attrition, isn't it? You do it again and again and again, and all the false stuff just falls away. And it's likewise that with the voice. So we think that the voice, well, it works out the best position for speaking is the same position for doing a movement. It works out to be completely constant with each other. So we're saying, well, that's probably the best way to find a voice. So the way we encourage that is to say you speak full voice, and we have a whole series of I guess, thematic devices, which we say, when I say to you, I know you're speaking out, but I want you to think that your voice is going into your body. So once again, these are paradoxes, these opposites. Once again, I'm speaking out, but of course I'm thinking in. So, oh splendor, sunburst, break, I'm thinking it's how it's going into my body, which is opposite, of course, and seems to be an incredible contradiction in terms. But it's really just the balancing effect of the positive and negative, isn't it? You've got the positive out and the negatives coming in, so you've got to have them, you give them equal weight, so to speak, and that's why that way your voice starts to resonate inside your body. And you achieve this very instinctively rather than sort of prescriptively. You just do it. Yeah. Just do it. And of course we increase the moral temperature of that by saying we'll do it standing on one leg. And paradoxically, it's actually easy to do what we're talking about on one leg.
Because you often ask at the end of a particularly long and grueling sequence of situations for the speech to be delivered, and in multiple times in different ways and in different positions. And it's interesting to hear the differences each time, even if you haven't cued for us to deliver it in different ways, if we're delivering it in exactly the same ways, but vocal range wise, but in different positions. So one leg up, sitting on the chair, standing all of those, facing the wall, doing the 360, all of those things change, I guess, the level of brain connection you have to the delivery of the speech, and changes where your mind is and where it and then as a result where it comes from.
That's right. I mean, all of those things. One is that you have to make sure that nobody doing this stuff thinks it's actually a physical movement, a movement class. It's very easy to do that if you don't really put voice in at any time. So a couple of times during this training I said, during the stomp, say the speech. So everybody goes, what the hell, I'm not used to that. That's the point. You've got to be ready to say the speech at any time. Otherwise, you're getting into sort of a stomp mode, which is actually precludes speech. Yes. And then you sort of, oh, I'm going to speech mode now. And that's one of the weaknesses of Western theatrical training, this separation of the events. So you have your movement over there, and then you trot over here to do your voice. And of course, they're never really conjoined. And it's sort of luck as to whether it happens, really. That's one reason. That everything you do is actually, the ultimate aim is to actually, it's a text-based theatre. It's not a movement-based theatre. So everything you do must have the voice as the end result. So all this stuff here, you've got to go, okay, at the end of all this stuff, I'm going to have to say something. I'm going to have to say my speech. So inside you the whole time, you're preparing, psychologically, physically for it anyway. That's one good thing. And it means that everything you do, no matter how exhausting, you're still going to have to say the speech at the end. So you can't just completely go, I'm just going to go nuts and not care about the end. Because at the end I'm going to have to say something. So that's a very powerful generator. And that also means that you could probably say, well, because of that, then your speech is actually inside you the whole time and not just extracted in the end from the air. So there's quite a number of reasons for that.